Welcome everybody to this webinar, and I think we have an exciting conversation ahead of us. At least I'm excited about the topics that we're going to talk about today. My name is Pascal Lagarde. I look after our composable practice at Valtech, and it's my pleasure to moderate this webinar today. We are here today with Peter from Kingfisher, with Gary from Fluent, and with Joseph from Akeneo. And I'm going to ask all three of them to quickly introduce themselves so that we know who we have on the call today. So Peter, maybe you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Pascal. Afternoon all. So I'm Peter Ash. I'm the product director for fulfillment and operations within Kingfisher. So all of the funky, great things that we have in our stores, how we get our products to our customers, all of the operational efficiencies that we look after on a day-to-day basis. I've worked in Tesco, Sainsbury's, B&Q, Kingfisher. I've been a retailer my whole life since a very small child. I'm really looking forward to today.
Wonderful. Sounds like you'll have plenty of experience to draw on today. Wonderful. Gary, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Pascal. Great introduction there, Peter. So I'm from Fluent Commerce. We'll talk about OMS and how that kind of fits into the picture a bit today. But my background is very much in retail. I've been working with retailers since the late 1990s. Been through a few recessions. Looks like we're in a bit of a tight spot at the moment. So, we'll see how this plays out. But I've worked in ERP, forecasting, allocation, replenishment, and latterly in things like personalization as well. So happy to put some insights in today where I can.
Wonderful. And Joseph?
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me. Nice to meet everybody. I'm Joe, so I'm the channel director for Akeneo. We're a product experience company with a flagship PIM product. I've worked with our ISVs at Akeneo the last couple of years. We've been part of the Mac Alliance for, I think, a year and a half now. So a big part of that has been how we've gone to market and the joint value propositions that we have with our fellow ISVs in the composable world. So yeah, hopefully can talk a bit more about that today.
Excellent. Wonderful. Yeah, so we'll be talking about composable and Mac today, where I think it's interesting that we now have the opportunity to maybe not talk about the usual suspects when we talk about composable architectures like commerce and content, but we're actually going to talk about OMS and PIM and how that topic is leveraged by brands such as Kingfisher. I think that's really interesting to kind of shine a light maybe on some of the other aspects of composable architectures. When we talk about composable architectures, we talk about it as this new architecture principle of building best of breed architectures from smaller components that do something specifically and do it really well. And I think this is a shift that we see in the industry as a whole, moving away from these large, slow-moving monoliths into much more nimble and agile architectures that are built up from very focused components. And I think that's some of the topics that we're going to talk about today, is about how migrating to a composable tech is beneficial, how it benefits the business, how it benefits end users. And we're going to talk a little bit about how there are many different routes to success, to growth, to profitability of composable architectures, and how that can potentially be translated into value for your company as an attendee today. So we already heard the mention of the Mac Alliance. Valtech is one of the founding members of the Mac Alliance, and this is an industry body that advocates, obviously, composable architecture and the use of Mac technologies. But it also has a strong ambition to kind of demystify some of the there's some of the ideas around composable and how it might potentially be complex or difficult. And hopefully that's also something that you will take away from this webinar is how you can actually use Mac technology to your benefit. So in terms of, as I said, we're going to talk about order management today. We're going to be talking about product information management and how this will help you on a route to operational efficiency and how you can start implementing these kind of things. So let's dive in, and Peter, to start with you. Kingfisher was quite set to implement change, and can you tell a little bit more about why Kingfisher actually needed to incorporate Composable into your digital ecosystem, and why order management was the kind of the domain that you selected to start with?
Yeah, sure. And I'll start with probably 30 seconds about Kingfisher, actually, and who Kingfisher are, because whenever you're in the pub and you talk about, you work for Kingfisher, everyone first of all says, "Oh, that beer company." We're not the beer company. So Kingfisher are made up of a number of brands or banners. So Screwfix, I'm sure you all know Screwfix, and B&Q and Castorama France and Brico Depot. And within these banners, these operating companies that we have formats set up. So B&Q and Castorama France and Poland are called big box formats. Yeah, clues in the name of what they are and what they sell with the amount of SKUs that are in them. Screwfix and areas like Trade Point, obviously focused on trade. And we've got discounters in Brico Depot, so all across Europe. And this challenge really initially came up from our supply and logistics officer at the time, formerly focused actually on big box, and posing a question of, how can I do multi-source fulfillment in a number of stores, a number of shops or digital hubs as we have them? And I'm a product person, so I've been a product person for a number of years. Give me a problem, and the first thing I obviously go and do is head straight into a discovery, go into a definition. We start getting subject matter experts involved across supply and logistics and operations and IT and digital. We get the solution architects involved. Solution architects obviously start scribbling whiteboards, and tech leads then get involved, and EAs then come on board and start obviously drawing boxes and lines, etc. And in answer, the first thing we came back to the supply and logistics officer with that problem was, we can't do multi-source fulfillment. And in essence, we had two challenges. So there were two problems that we were facing into. The first is, at that time, and still today, our e-commerce and our order management solution is just a monolithic legacy. You used that word early on. I won't say who it is, but we all have worked in these worlds in the past. If I try and change text on an email, it's going to take me 2 weeks to do it. I then have to do a load of regression testing. I've got to put release notes together. I've then got to plan releases in. We've worked and coupled everything into this legacy platform for 5 years. So there's nothing out of the box anymore. It is just a chunk, a mass of boxes and wires that we have to work into. Now, we're in the process of decomposing that at the moment, but that will be another webinar another day. I'll go into the second problem, which is actually about our fulfillment. So our fulfillment in our big boxes is actually really complex. So if you go into DIY.com, don't do it yet, carry on listening, but go into DIY.com afterwards, the B&Q website. We offer our customers two things: home delivery or click and collect. But in essence, underneath that, there's 12, 13 other fulfillment routes. So click and collect same day, click and collect next day, click and collect within 2 hours, click and collect within an hour, or click and collect within a minute if you're in Screwfix. We do things like sprint, so getting the products to the customer within 15 minutes. We have fulfillment centers, showroom fulfillment centers, distribution centers. We do to home, we do to store, to homes. We've got multiple fulfillment routes. And that's when we started to look at this and say, so what we need is to start decomposing our legacy solutions and implement a new order management solution, so a headless order management solution. And more importantly at the time, an order sourcing capability or a mediator, order orchestrator, numerous names, but rules generated. So we needed something that had to be flexible so we could then start changing and being quite swift in the changes of those fulfillment routes. And that's actually when we started to have conversations with Fluent, hence the roll into this.
Wonderful. That's a story that makes a lot of sense, and especially, I mean, what I always recognize also is that, where you can probably ship a pack of batteries all across the country, but shipping a bag of cement all across the country doesn't make a lot of sense. So it makes it, the DOI domain is a very interesting one that brings additional complexity, I guess, to logistics, as you just pointed out. That's really interesting.
And also when you think about that, so B&Q have got 300 stores, but 50 of those stores can cover every single postcode in the UK. So how do we then focus on 50 stores and put the energy into those 50 stores rather than all 300? And the range and the size of the products and the amount of goods as well. So yeah,
interesting stuff. And you mentioned that indeed you guys landed on Fluent to basically expand these order management capabilities that you needed for your business. Yeah. Why Fluent? What was the kind of the specifics that made you make that decision?
I think so the initial conversations with Fluent, and also having Valtech as an SI partner and conversations with Valtech, how Valtech have used Fluent in the past, there were probably two main factors for us. There's certainly the one that was more important to me was I wanted to be able to prioritize components. So we wanted to piecemeal what was a huge solution or great capabilities, many capabilities, and take the first component of Fluent, which we used the order sourcing capability. We did some upfront integration with our stores, our fulfillment centers, our dropship vendors for things like location and products. And then when we've got that core capability to then start implementing the rules on top. And actually what we did was we started to take slices of a customer's basket. So if you can imagine multiple orders that are coming through the system, we'll start running through the sourcing solution and into order management. The first slice of a customer's basket we took was a parcel. So here's a product in a customer's basket. It's a parcelable size. So, weights and dimensions mean I can stick it in a motorbike and shoot off. And then put some rules on top of that to then test and learn. So we started small, we started to say, well, here's 10% of our orders. Let's start to look at the rule set of 10% of our orders and learn ourselves in what's happening. So that bit about doing prioritized components actually led us into a better place with how we were going to implement it. So what I didn't want to do was do a 3-year waterfall project where we started in, 2021 and said to the guys in Fluent, what are we going to do? What are we going to implement? Having the conversations with our customers. One second, sorry. Having our conversations with our customers and there's the joys of working from home and the delivery man turning up with the dog barking in the background, and how we and talking to our customers about what we're going to implement. What it allowed us to do was start looking at this product and start iteratively implementing bits of it. So looking at it in a productized model, start putting iterative delivery in, and delivering incremental value as we go along the way. So we were doing it as a productized tool. We called it beacons, by the way. We didn't call it milestones. We looked at it and said, here's a beacon, here's an achievement, here's a point in time that we can celebrate what we've done, test and learn, and then move to the next piece. So prioritizing the components and able to implement it in a productized way was probably the key factors.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think that's one of the kind of the values that a lot of clients are looking to get out of going composable is being able to do it much more iteratively, also being agile based on what you're learning along the way, and adapting your route to the next beacon, as you say. I love that idea of calling them beacons rather than milestones, but that's also another conversation.
You have a look online and what a beacon is, and it says it's a warning sign or a signal or a celebration, and it could be all three, right? When you get that implementation, here's a warning, but here's a celebration.
Excellent. So maybe switching over to you, Gary, and talk a little bit more about reaching beacons or milestones, and where do you guys see, from your experience with the many customers that are implementing Fluent, what does typical OMS implementations look like, and where do you see differences or similarities to the approach that Peter and the team have chosen for Kingfisher?
Yeah, thanks, Pascal. I mean, Peter's done a great job there, I think, to map out what is probably a sort of a textbook approach to OMS. And when I think about composable commerce, often we're talking about integration, data, and all these sorts of things. But actually, what I think about with OMS in particular is, how do you prioritize the use case, the business value, and the problem that you want to solve? And then, as Peter says, sort of cut through the Fluent platform to be able to deliver that. Because, we have our, through our APIs and our integration capability, we're going to connect into the systems and grab the data that we need, and we're going to help improve communication to customers as well, and connect out to things like fulfillment companies and all that sort of stuff. And that's the integration part of it. But really, as Peter says, for B&Q, it was about the sourcing side of things. For others, it's different. So it's that kind of where is that priority? Where is the problem to solve? And if you look at the three things that we tend to do at Fluent in terms of like the functional side of things, we're unlocking inventory. So we're making as much inventory as possible available to customers, and that's the availability side of things. So we want to put that availability on the site or in any customer touch point so that it's in real time, it's accurate, and we can make a promise against the delivery we're going to make. And then from an orchestration perspective, which is the next part, we want to orchestrate those orders across that complex landscape of DCs, stores, dropship vendors, marketplaces, and kind of bring that orchestration together so we can source and then deliver that order in the most cost-effective way possible, which is what Peter was looking at there. And then really the third thing is connecting across the different systems. So whether it's legacy ERP, WMS, reaching out to carriers, making updating customers on the progress of their order, all those sorts of things, that's the bits that we kind of pull together. So taking that capability and then sort of slicing through that to say, even down to an order type, as Peter's saying, or into the customer basket to say, we really want to home in on, which part of this we want to improve on is, I think it's a fantastic way to approach it. What we then see is a sort of the flip side of this, which is, what are the sort of business benefits that we drive from that? Because, composable commerce should be driving deep business benefits. And again, there's kind of three things that we focus on, and Peter might be able to embellish on this a little bit, but what we see is overselling. So overselling inventory, and unfortunately leading to cancelled orders. We'll see across some of our retailers 10 to 15% of orders are being cancelled. And it's really because there isn't an accurate appreciation of the inventory data. So we start to tackle that problem. But if you're cancelling orders, it drives a bus through the CMO's acquisition strategy. It's bad for the brand, and from a repeat purchases perspective, it's really it's not great. So tackling that is one big issue. Then underselling. So probably 50% plus of inventory that's in a retailer at any one time is not being exposed to customers. So that's how do we manage things like buffer stocks? How do we look at visibility, back into the supply chain? And, if we can unlock that order, we can increase, revenue, we can increase AOV and all those sorts of things. And then the third thing is really about optimizing the fulfillment. So can the fulfillment be faster? Can it be more efficient? Can we reduce, transfers of inventory between locations? And the important thing is, can we get to a single source fulfillment to drive down costs, reduce split shipments, and start to meet the customer's expectations? So, in the past, it was next day delivery. Now it's 1 hour click and collect, or it's 1 hour electric bike delivery. And then the knock on of that is things like customer service calls. So where is my order is probably the single biggest query that we're seeing in customer services. And so if we can better inform customers, we can reduce those by, say, 40%. And that's a huge business benefit off the back of this as well. So there's kind of like a value chain that comes out of this. And some of these things are going to be more important than others. So honing in on that is really what we see customers doing at the moment, and using the composable capability to do that as they try and grow, increase number of sites, increase complexity with marketplaces and all this sort of stuff. It just gets exponentially more difficult to do. So what we're looking to do is see how we tackle the start of that, and then build a fast follow approach that then tackles those other issues.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think it resonates really well with the approaches that a lot of folks are taking to order management specifically, but also to trying to figure out how to best serve their clients in general. And one of the things we often see when introducing Composable in organizations is that it requires a bit of convincing of stakeholders that maybe sit outside of the IT department. Peter, can you talk a little bit about how was this a difficult journey within Kingfisher, and what did it look like?
I have to say, the stakeholder management is probably harder than the development and implementation. And I've been saying this quote for a year to many of my colleagues. The work we've been doing, the project name we had was DOM, Distributed Order Management, and utilising components out of that to implement, as I spoke about. But I often said that it is a servant to many masters in Kingfisher as a programme. You've got the supply and logistics officer who is talking to us about cost efficiencies, about rerouting to cheaper routes and vehicle usage. You've got the digital teams who are talking about online availability, better NPS scores, and obviously sales. Gary spoke about improved availability online early on. You've got the commercial teams who are now looking at, well, how can I utilize order sourcing to push customers to where I've got more stock instead of moving the stock, because it's easier doing it that way. It's cheaper doing that way. You've got my CTO who's talking to me about resources being used and timelines in delivery, and you've obviously got the CFO who's talking to me about NPV and budgets. So it's a servant to many masters. The key thing that I probably learned over the last year is actually everyone in Kingfisher, so from the product manager up to the CEO, are learning about the product. So we've done so much test and learn as we've gone in through the development. One of the great capabilities that we've had with Fluent is the ability to put something into production and then put it into the passive mode. So a shadow mode, I think we call it now. It's fantastic, being able to put this product, knowing it's in prod, seeing the orders that are being routed through and where we're routing the orders from, but actually seeing it as a passive mode, in the sleeping mode. That's helping us test and learn. It's helping all of the stakeholders test and learn. And obviously, when things are going well, a lot of people tend to look at it and say, well, how can we do it cheaper? How can we do it quicker as well? And so that whole sort of collaboration between everyone and all of the senior stakeholders, the managing expectations as you go through the journey. This isn't something that you will implement today and get all of the benefits tomorrow. It is that continuous improvement that you're driving through on it, and then learning and changing rules, etc. That's the ability, that's the flexibility we wanted. But I think the key thing, and we'll probably talk about this a bit later on, Gary mentioned about things like improving availability, as I said. That North Star and those OKRs, and having that framework to sit there and say, this is the vision, this is what we are trying to achieve. We've all signed up to this. Here are the OKRs, here are the measures against those OKRs, and that continuous sort of conversation, bringing it back to the table, test, learn, fail. It's okay to fail as well, as we always say, but then to be flexible and change again. So difficult, but positive. You know, when everyone's that interested, it's positive, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to hear how you indeed have all these different objectives coming from different parts of the organizations, looking at fulfillment and order management, you know, from their individual perspective, and obviously trying to, you know, get value out of the investment that you're making into an order management system. Maybe pivoting a little bit to, you know, other aspects of operational efficiency and bringing Joe into the conversation. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, from your perspective, how a Mac technology and for product information management and specifically, how that brings operational efficiency into the organizations that you guys work with?
Yeah, sure. A lot of it comes down to exactly what Peter said, the continuous improvement approach. And having worked with a lot of the Mac ISVs over the last couple of years, there's hard to find a lot that there isn't some sort of joint value proposition with between them all. You know, some are far more obvious than others. Some are a bit more elusive and maybe nice to have. So a Fluent and an Akinio PIM could feed commerce, for example, and that's, you know, 101. Whereas we've had people like product discovery platforms that would sit, you know, typically with a search and merch team and take things like clickstream data for products and push that back into the PIM for better enrichment of product attributes. And that could be something like, you know, that product discovery platform may realize that people are searching for tortilla chips or nachos when looking for to buy Doritos, for example, but we've got them categorized as crisps in the PIM. We can take that data for better filtering and to improve a customer experience. And that's maybe something that before Composable, you would never see touching product catalog and product data and search and merch and product discovery in the front. So it opens up new and exciting possibilities like that. The important thing with Mac ISVs in general is what Peter said. You plan your product strategy, your strategy around what works for you and what tackles what you need for your business. You test that and you see you adopt the ones that provide the best business case for you. Each of us provides a specialist area. We would love to say we're a best of breed PIM. There's catalog functionality within, you know, commerce platforms, but ultimately you will reach a ceiling with what you can do with a monolith in a lot of ways. If you're going to make a big change in a monolith, and from monolith to monolith, it involves a re-platforming. Whereas by taking a Mac architecture, you could tackle the first thing that your business needs to tackle that challenge and slowly build up the change management and move things over. If you go big bang and try and re-platform, all of a sudden, it's not just you, your marketing team or your e-com team that are impacted. It's everybody that works with design and front end fulfillment all at the same time. And that can go really well. And there's examples of people moving from monolith to monolith, using Fluent, using Akeneo, using Valtech, where that has worked really well. But you have to also understand that there is risk that comes with changing everything at once, that performance would dip, rather than as you remove all the optimizations you've done to the previous monolith and you change all business processes and strategy around it. If you take the composable approach, you tackle things bit by bit. The changes are smaller, they're less of a risk, and you only keep what works. With these smaller changes, you get exactly what Peter said he was looking for, increased flexibility and agility, because you don't have to retain platforms that don't work. You can add them. You can add a Fluent. It sounds like Peter has added a Fluent to the monolithic platform that they were using. And if it comes a point where that commerce engine needs to be changed, the team that work with OMS can finish work on a Friday and turn up on Monday and still be using Fluent, or they could do the same if Akeneo is plugged into Monolith. And therefore, the change management process involved and the future proofing and the flexibility and the things you can do to change the business means that it's far easier. It's a lot more agile. And we're in a time when businesses a lot of businesses are having to implement change. Gary was saying we might be going into another recession. Fingers crossed not, but people are being tasked to get more with less, or to maybe businesses have to pivot all of a sudden, and the board or the CEO comes in and says, we need you to focus on total customer lifetime value now. We can't acquire more, or we want to focus on getting the most out of what we've got. We've got a ton of products, ton of customers, let's focus on those. With microservices, you now can say, right, all of a sudden, stop what we're doing. We don't need to we're not tied to the mast of a ship following a certain roadmap. Now we want to look at loyalty or promotions or et cetera, et cetera. It could be that you're completely the other way around, and you have fewer products and you need to widen the net, and then you could speak to a Fluent or an Akeneo and say, we need to all of a sudden be on this marketplace, that marketplace, this channel, TikTok, Instagram, whatever. But it opens up that flexibility to you.
Yeah, I think as you say, Joe, there is I think more attention now to value and getting faster return on investment, basically on any initiative that's out there. And I think Peter, you did a really good job at highlighting some of the specific value that the different stakeholders in Kingfisher were looking to get out of implementing the OMS. Joe, can you talk a little bit about do you have some typical examples of value that clients are looking to get out of implementing a PIM in general, and maybe more specifically implementing a PIM that sits on a Mac stack with a composable architecture?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when we talk about value in general as Mac ISVs, we want to try and talk about lowering that total cost of ownership. In reality, the best way and the way we should be thinking about it is to move, maybe not lower the total cost of ownership, but make the spend more higher yielding. So moving budget from updates and patches and maintaining to business growth, to acquiring the next ISV that might help you, or to optimizing what you're doing with a Fluent and Akeneo. I mean, to speak about us specifically, we really want to make sure that our customers use their time on high value activity, that you're not hiring a really expensive merchandiser or a really talented merchandiser or e-commerce exec, etc., to sit there plugging in data, or to have to wait or be hindered by an IT team to have to patch or update the platform to allow them to do their job. We want more automation, more AI, better use of software to provide better business impacts quickly. So those people aren't coming into work and sitting there enriching product data and doing lots of manual stuff. They could use some of the tools that I've mentioned maybe to populate that for them and push it out to lots of different channels to ultimately try and do more with less.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. That it is about creating business impact, and I think that's it's interesting that we are getting into a position that we can talk about more about the business impact and less about just the effort of keeping the lights on, so to say, of the digital channel. We have a little less than 10 minutes left in this webinar, and I want to invite anybody who is on the call today who has any questions for either for Peter, Joe, or Gary to put them in the chat. I think you all know how it works with Q&A and webinars, so feel free to ask any questions. In the meantime, Peter, coming back to your experience so far, knowing what you know now, what would be kind of good advice for anybody listening in with kind of similar challenges? How should they prioritize their growth strategy, and where could they start?
God, I tell you, if I knew that, I'd be a consultant, wouldn't I? for those businesses, I think probably learning. So I'll talk a little bit about learnings from where we've been in our journey, and I'll go back a little bit to what Gary was talking around. Three things he spoke about: the overselling, so addressing the overselling, the underselling, and optimizing fulfillment. What we've experienced is actually to get a success out of Fluent, or to get if we look at our OKRs, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So we have, and I'm going to have to censor check this against what I've got in front of me, by the way, just to remind myself every now and then. So we have a number of OKRs. Our North Star was about improving customer availability and improving customer accessibility. And it's absolutely right about this overselling side a bit. And the online availability, so things like buffer stocks, Gary spoke about. We had our OKRs split up into two areas. One was around sales optimization. So one OKR was called Save the Sale. So if I'm unable to fulfill this product from a primary route, let's hit a secondary route. We spoke about save the quantity. So if I can't fulfill all the quantity of the customer's order in this route, fill it in a second route. And then we looked at things like reduced fulfillment routes and reduced costs. And probably the learning is, first of all, we were looking at figures there to say, wow, Fluent's doing a great job, because we're starting to see some great percentages of saving sales, right? So I spoke earlier on about parcelable products and taking a slice of the customer's basket in parcelable products. That's about 10% of B&Q's order volume that we're taking through. We will ramp that up to 30% over the next quarter, and get to a stage eventually of 100%. But the more you see Fluent saving, the more you see a problem. And what I mean by that is the root cause of it isn't, Fluent is capturing your root cause, your problems with availability. So you then lead to a place of, so how do we improve our availability? How do I start to get to a place of real-time stock and showing the customers online real-time stock? Sometimes your buffers help, sometimes your buffers of stock don't help. So I think the biggest learning that I would have, that stakeholder engagement, having everyone rowing in the same direction, but you're never going to stop learning, right? So we've spent a year, and I've had some real experts on this. They never stop learning about the capabilities and then heading in new directions. And you should accept that and embrace that and say, right, time to move to the next beacon and the next beacon and the next beacon. That's probably biggest learning from our teams, I would say.
Yeah, wonderful. And it's when we talk about OKRs, and it's I think it's related to one of the questions in the Q&A. The results that you see, can you? And I know it's always difficult to kind of put numbers on it, but can you quantify some of the results that you're getting out of the investment that you're making?
Yeah. So obviously, I'll be careful and conscious about the commercial side of it, and I'll talk about percentages. So if we think about B&Q on an average week, so B&Q and home improvement retail has peaks and troughs. Yeah, so we're going into a great peak this weekend, right? And I'm hoping that the sun is going to stay out, because garden furniture, 20% off garden furniture, by the way, if you do go into DIY.com afterwards. But we've got some great deals, right? And so we go into our peaks and troughs, and what we want to see is actually those peaks and troughs as well. So as we start to see peaks in things like click and collect orders, home delivery orders, we'd expect Fluent and what Fluent's doing to follow that. B&Q will do on average around 150,000 picks a week, so click and collect orders a week. They can go up to 200,000. Screwfix, obviously, Screwfix, everything is a pick. They have a back of house, so a trade counter. And if we think about 150,000, you then start saying the slice of that is around 10%, i.e. the parcelable products. We would still expect to see single-digit figures. So we wouldn't expect to see Fluent we're saving 20% of your 10%. And it's not. And that's good, because what that means is that we are, looking at the root cause, we're utilizing things like stock efficiencies in the first place. But in those areas, I will say that we are, and I'll say this quite confidently, because I was with the CFO only yesterday talking about the next investment of Fluent. Our cost saving from our original business case of what we wanted to save over 2 years was double-digit millions. So double-digit million cost savings. And we actually put no sales benefits against our business case at the very beginning. We didn't need to. We didn't want to sit there and say, we're going to start producing X amount of sales going forward. I think all of us have spoken around, a lull in footfall and a lull in orders at the moment in where we are. But we're still seeing from our save the sale areas exceeding our expectations of the sales that we're saving, which is great in one way, because it's somewhere I can sit there and prove the business case. But it's not so great in another way, because it means that we've got other areas of root cause to focus on, as we spoke about earlier on. But I will say, in anyone going into this, set your OKRs, but don't set targets on those OKRs. Don't sit there with a KPI and say, we're going to do 10%, because you won't know, and it will change. And actually, as you go through your journey, decreasing the amount of sales that Fluent is actually saving for you is a good thing. Because it means that you don't have to, it means that you've actually tackled the root cause of it in the first place.
Exactly. I think that's a good comment to end this webinar on. That it is about continuously updating or resetting your beacons and trying to figure out what a logical next step is, and not set these very hard KPIs and then just monitoring and chase after them.
Yeah, it was interesting, by the way. So we started this journey in March, probably February, March 2020. And we all know what happened then, right? I mean, I actually went away when I came back to the supply logistics officer and said, actually, we can't do this in our current stack. I then went on holiday for 2 weeks, and the big thing happened, right? So the big COVID happened, and what that showed us was the need to accelerate it. So there was obviously challenges in every business about how much you're going to invest in your tech, but it showed that we needed to accelerate it. It showed that we should have, had these conversations and put these solutions in place. B&Q went from 1 week of taking 15,000 orders today to taking 500,000 click and collect orders. And there's no system that we actually had could cope with that.
No.
So it meant that we had to balance the side of what are we going to invest in? How are we going to be flexible, i.e. put those components in to start helping us as a business to, accelerate our e-commerce growth.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we definitely seen over the past 3 years by now, that how important it is to be able to adapt to what's happening in the market, whether it's COVID, whether it's economic changes, whether it's a war somewhere in the world. It's very important for businesses to be able to responsive to whatever is thrown at them. With that, I really want to thank you, Joe, Gary, and especially Peter, for joining today and sharing your experience, sharing your thoughts. I found it an interesting conversation. I hope that our attendees agree. So once again, thanks for joining today, and thanks everybody for listening in. And feel free to reach out to the Veltec team if you want to know more about PIM, about OMS, and the work we've done with Kingfisher.